you know, but one of my favorite people to listen to, his name is Tim Keller. And he recently, I say recently, within the past few years, went to go be with Jesus. But after he was done preaching, he lived in New York City. He was a church planter in New York City. And after he got done preaching, he would do a Q&A session. And every Sunday would do a Q&A session where some of the brightest and most intelligent people in the world would come and be like, oh, this is my time to stump the pastor. That's what they thought. And his wife is sharing the story, Kathy, and about how the first question he would ask whenever someone would come and he wouldn't recognize them, he would say, hey, do you treasure Jesus? Do you really enjoy God? Because here's the thing, I'll answer your question. I'm more than happy to answer anything about you, but unless you see Jesus for who he truly is, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And we're gonna see this morning is Jesus is gonna be walking on his way with this triumphal entry that's coming next week. He's leaving Jericho. And he sees these two blind men on the side of the road who cannot physically see, but they see Jesus who he is. And the people, the crowds who are with him, are actually rebuking these men because although they can physically see, they cannot spiritually see who Jesus is. And that's our question for us this morning. I don't know what you walked in with. I don't know what your background is in church or not church, but the invitation is for us all. Can we see Jesus clearly? Can we really see him for who he says he is? And can I trust that is enough? Because what I have found, and I coach a lot of girls softball, it doesn't matter how good the swing looks. If they swing with their eyes closed, they're gonna miss it. And the invitation for us this morning is for us to open our eyes and to see Jesus for who he is. Because the reality is we can't just be overcome with facts. Can't be overcome with just a lot of right things that are being said. It has to be something that transforms us in our mind, our heart, and our soul. That's the invitation for us this morning. So my big idea for us is this. Jesus shows us that there are people who see but are blind. And there are people who are blind who see. He invites us to see who we are and who he is as the Messiah. Now, if I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like I have an advantage sometimes. I did not grow up in the church, so my faith story was my freshman year of college, going to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes retreat, hearing the gospel, and my eyes being completely wide open to Jesus. But I also understand that a lot of people don't have that story. Some of you in this room grew up in the church, and so there's a familiarity around it where you think, oh yeah, I've got the scripture that I've known since I was a kid. I've got this idea of who Jesus is. But my question for all of us this morning is, are we people who think we can see but are really blind, or are we people who can really see? What are you really looking for in Jesus? Are you here because Jesus for you is going to give you all of the things in this life that you want? Or are you here because you've had this really difficult season? You're like, I just got to try and change something up. Friends, neither one of those are bad. My invitation for all of us is that he himself is enough, not just what he brings. So let me read our copy of God's word. We're gonna be in Matthew 20, starting in verse 29. And as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. The crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent. But they cried out all the more, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. Stopping, Jesus called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Lord, let our eyes be opened. And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they received their sight and followed him. This is the word of the Lord. Would you pray with me? Father, open our eyes, not physically this morning, but spiritually, to see you. Help us get a clear picture of your goodness and your grace. Let us be people who want to praise you with all that we do. It's in Jesus' name we pray, amen. So we see first this cry of knowing and a cry of being known from these two blind men. So I'll read 29. As they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him, and behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. Now, you guys see what's going on? Jesus is leaving Jericho and he's starting to make his way to Jerusalem for this triumphal entry. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the next few months talking about the week leading up to Jesus' death and resurrection, this triumphal entry. And it's kind of the last thing that we see in Matthew before we get to that place. And I find it really fascinating that Matthew puts it here because we've seen that the closer we get to the cross in Matthew, the more direct Jesus is about who he is, isn't he? Right? So think about this. They are crying out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. But just imagine with me for a second the desperation of these blind men. Notice what's happening. They are outside of this city, aren't they? Jesus meets them on the path to Jerusalem. This would have been the space where all of the blind, the sick, the non-welcome into the city would have been. They're not there. They're not like a part of the ethos of the community. They're the outsiders. They're the ones like, like you would say to your kids, are you sure you want to hang out with that kid? I know their parents. See, what Jesus is doing here is, these aren't just a couple of men who are on the side of the road who play incredible musical instruments and wear sunglasses. No, these blind men are not a part of society. They're not. They're desperate. And think about this. They can't see Jesus, can they? No. So how do they know Jesus is walking? They've heard the stories. Now, I don't know. My guess is that people would have been walking by from Jericho to Jerusalem and said, hey, oh my gosh, this Jesus fella, he changed my life. Completely changed my life. Hey, you know what? Like, I watched him raise someone from the dead. Your blindness is nothing for this Jesus fella. Hey, oh my gosh, like if we could just get Jesus to come over here and heal you, I have been healed. That's the fame that's growing around Jesus right now. The fame. And I think that is what we see here in the text, right? So Jesus starts leading his way to Jerusalem where he will go to the cross. And what we see here is this language of Son of David. Look, this language of Son of David is, we've traced this a few times throughout the book of Matthew. This is Jesus, you are the promised king. You are the Messiah. You have a glory about you. You have a difference about you. You have this awe about you. That's what these blind men are saying. There's something different about you. Jesus is the king, and they're realizing this king has come, and his restoration, or his kingdom brings restoration in all areas of life. All of them. That's why they're crying out, right? They're desperate. Think about this. They were not allowed to go into the temple. They weren't allowed to go into the presence of God because of their quote unquote blindness. They weren't even allowed to go into the city. No. See, friends, the purpose of the king bringing his kingdom is to restore what has been broken. That's the purpose here. And think about this. These blind men, right, who are walking, if there's anyone who gets it more, there's no one else who gets it more than them. Think about this. Why is it important that they are saying it? Because they understand more than anything, more than the crowd, what it feels like to live in a what? Broken world. They get it. And so what do they see? Jesus, do you guys see this? Jesus goes to them. On his way that he's walking from Jericho to Jerusalem, he walks by these men. Could have gone a different direction, but doesn't. When Jesus brings the kingdom, he promises that brokenness will be made new. And friends, every single time he pursues the lost sheep. He goes after the broken. Friends, here's the reality. The kingdom does not begin with desperate people finding God. It begins with a gracious God seeking and finding his desperate people. It's not the opposite. His healing, always, we've seen this in the book of Matthew, every single time he heals, it's pointing this future restoration, this future glory that awaits for us, because we know he may heal someone blind, but what? That's not the end of their story. There's gotta be something better on the future. And there is every single time. Now, when I was a kid, my dad used to take me down to Palm Springs because my uncle and my grandpa lived on a golf course that had a pro-am event. And every year you guys know me, I was so pumped because it was like in January, February time, and all of the baseball players were down there. So we're trying to get autographs, we're trying to do all this thing. It was just so much fun. Well, one year that we're down there, my dad sees this crowd of people walking behind this guy that neither one of us recognized. I'm probably like 10, 11. And as he's walking by, he walks right next to my dad. My dad's like, well, I got a baseball and I got a Sharpie. I might as well get him to sign it. He seems pretty important. Not knowing at all who he was. Come to find out, after we got home and showed my sister this autographed ball and a picture of this guy, Justin Timberlake was walking by in the height of the NSYNC days. And there were so many people walking. See, my dad and I had physical sight, didn't we? We just didn't know who the heck Justin Timberlake was, why anybody cared, or what he looked like. But my sister had something we didn't. She understood the significance of who he was, who he is. And friends, what Jesus is trying to show us in this passage is that just because you have physical sight doesn't mean you see and understand who he is. And just because you cannot see in person yet, you hear the voice of God, you see through a mirror dimly, and you know who the God of the universe is. These two men in the passage are physically blind, but they see something that the crowd around them cannot see. They don't just cry out, Jesus, help us. They cry out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. He's the promised king. And friends, true faith, real true faith, is trusting in who he is and treasuring what he has done for us, not because of anything he gives us innately, right? Not because you said an incredible prayer and the next day you won the lottery. No, wouldn't be too bad, would it? No. Friends, when we can start to see the brokenness of this world and not want Jesus for what he can give us as this escape from the reality we find ourselves in, but when we can start to want him for who he is in the midst of a broken and dark world, is when we start to truly understand who he is. See, they're coming with their needs. They're coming desperate and dependent. They're saying, have mercy on us. And do you see here? The blindness of these men is not a mere inconvenience to Jesus, is it? Jesus' tone isn't, really, dude? Have you ever tried not being blind? Like, I know LASIK hasn't come out yet, but like there is a thing that's coming. No, he didn't say that to him, does he? No. In his kindness, he takes and welcomes our brokenness and wants to make us new. Friends, not because of anything they're doing, right? So, Jesus gives sight so that blind people can see and treasure him. Now, notice how the brokenness plays itself out. It plays itself out not with necessarily Jesus. We see the blind people who have this brokenness, but what's the crowd's response? Rebuke them. Read with me. The crowd, what? Rebuked them, telling them to be silent. But they cried out all the more, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. Think about this for a second. You want to talk about real blindness? These people who are following Jesus in their crowds are saying, you are a rabbi, you're an incredible teacher, I just want to follow you. And these blind men are on the side of the road saying the words, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David, acknowledging him as the Messiah. And they say, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. I got to spend some time with my teacher. What? Unbelievable. Think about this. There were people who are walking with Jesus for 3 years on this trip. 3 years. And what do? They still rebuke blind men who are calling him the Messiah. You want to talk about blindness? They can't see it all. Notice what the crowd does. The crowd says, be quiet. Stay over there. You're not welcome with my teacher. Gosh, these guys are so inconvenient. Sorry, Jesus. Sorry. We'll try to hide them from you as you're walking along this path, Jesus. We'll try and keep them quiet. Friends, the crowds are physically, they can see, but spiritually, they are broken, aren't they? But look, the response of the blind is beautiful. Think about this. they cry out harder. They are so assured that Jesus is the Messiah. They say, no, you're not stopping me. That's the king. He's the only one who can help me. And I'm going to go straight to him. They are trusting that Jesus welcomes even the outcast. And as they are yelling this as Jesus walks by, they are trusting nothing is inconvenient for God. Nothing. They're physically broken, but spiritually seeing. It's beautiful, isn't it? See, Jesus is not responding to the blind men. No. Jesus directly goes to them. And Matthew is trying to highlight the irony here, right? He's highlighting the irony between these people who can physically see and spiritually cannot. And he's highlighting that these men are physically cannot see, but spiritually they realize and see who he is as much as they can before the cross. Now, they see not just someone who can heal them. They see someone greater than just what they receive in their eyes being healed, right? That's the first thing they say. The first thing that they say is not, heal me, is it? The first thing they say is, you're the Messiah. You're the King of the world. Now, Katie and I went to a concert on Friday night, and it was a blast. We got home way too late yesterday morning, but we had a great time. And as we're driving into the bay, when you're crossing the Bay Bridge, there have only been a few times when I've been actually able to see, especially at that time, as beautiful and as clear as it is, so that you can see clearly the Golden Gate Bridge from the Bay Bridge. Anybody else, maybe you're not super familiar, that's okay. It was one of those nights. But most of the time when I hop onto the Bay Bridge, there is old Carl the friend, the fog that is just covering the city, right? And what I've noticed about this fog is when it gets bad enough, and I've had a few times when it's been this bad, where you can't really see what's in front of you or over to the left or to the right of the Bay Bridge. For what? I know I'm going into the city because when I stop and when I roll the windows down, I can hear the seagulls. I can smell the ocean water. I know I'm on a path as I get onto the Bay Bridge that leads me into the city, even though I can't see it yet. The issue isn't a seeing or not seeing. The issue, whenever I hop over there, and I would argue the issue for our spiritual lives is do I trust even when I can't see? Because what's happening here is these men have been walking with Jesus saying, I'm following you. I can see. I don't trust you're going to heal a blind man. He's actually, two blind men, they're actually a nuisance. Forget about those guys. Where these blind men cannot see, but they hear, they smell. The rumbling of the crowd is coming along, and they say, it's him. They know, although they cannot see, they know he is the Messiah, and that is the path that they take. And this is the irony that Matthew is trying to communicate. They can't see Jesus with their eyes, but somehow they see him more clearly than the people standing right in front and beside Jesus. Friends, Jesus gives sight so the blind people can see and treasure him. And it's not just for those who physically cannot see. It's for everyone who spiritually cannot see him. It's the point of the passage. And here's the thing. It really reveals the heart of God whenever we look at here, right? Outcasts, blind men, not loved by society, and Jesus, what? Goes to them. He goes to them. Read with me. 32, and stopping, Jesus called them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And Jesus, in pity, or other translations use in compassion, touched their eyes. And immediately they recovered their sight. And what, church? Followed him. Now, do you see the heart of Jesus here? He desires to help, right? The kindness of God is that he runs towards brokenness, not away from brokenness. The kindness of God is that he continues to chase after. The kindness of God is that he goes to the outskirts, to the people who have nothing, who can bring him nothing, who have no status, no ability. And he says, "I will make you whole." Jesus responds in compassion. These people have already called him the Messiah. They've already said it. They're right. Well, the crowds are trying to rebuke them. No. Jesus says, "Okay, hey, what can I do for you?" Already knowing full well what he can do for them. And think about this. You want to talk about countercultural. Remember, these people, these men, or anybody else with sickness and disease would have been on the outskirts of town. Leprosy would have been in this category, right? And people had this idea that if you were to touch people, touch them, that were blind or sick or hurting or deformed, then you would receive that upon yourself. You would get their brokenness. They thought brokenness multiplies brokenness. Think about this. So what does Jesus do? He could have spoken the word, "Open your eyes," right? He doesn't. He could have, and he does throughout other points in the book of Matthew, say, "Hey, rise and walk," doesn't he? But he doesn't. He goes to brokenness. In a world where people think if you touch brokenness and pain, you'll receive brokenness, and flips it on his head and says, "You want to be healed? The healer will touch you and heal you." He touches brokenness and heals it immediately. And he heals because he is the Messiah who does what he pleases. Friends, the king doesn't simply pass by the broken. He calls the broken to himself, whether it be spiritually or physically, wherever we are. This is who he is. Think about that for a second. Jesus asks them what they want. "Hey, what do you want me to do for you? You've nailed this. You got it. I'm the Messiah." While Jesus already knows what they need. And they respond with a simple, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." They don't ask for money, do they? They don't ask for social acceptance. They ask, "I have a real need that needs fixing, and I need you to fix it because I believe you're the only one who can fix it." Friends, that's faith. That is faith. True sight is fundamentally the receiving and placing our trust in treasuring Jesus. And here's the thing, we don't manufacture sight, do we? No, none of us in this room are like, "Oh yeah, I came out of the womb praising Jesus." No. The blind men cannot remedy their condition. Jesus must act. And friends, we must realize we are blind, in need of sight. And that can only come from Jesus. The king who has authority over sickness is also compassionate towards those who are suffering. The blind men are not healed because they see well enough. No. They see because Jesus acts mercifully towards them. Now, friends, this is why the gospel is such good news. Because if there were any ounce of ability to bring to Jesus our ability, we would be so lost, wouldn't we? No. Friends, the gospel is Jesus saying, you are blind, revealing that to us. Revealing to us we are broken. Not just we live in a broken world, we ourselves are broken. We need grace. And the kindness of God is that we see in this passage, he moves towards the blind, towards the desperate, towards those who have nothing to offer, and gives them and us sight to see that he is the king of the universe and he is building his kingdom here and now. Jesus does not wait for blind people to make their way to him. Jesus pursues, chases after, and seeks the blind. He gives us eyes to see and he gives us hearts to believe. He reveals himself as the one we were made to see. Now, if you don't know me, you'll get a little bit more of a glimpse from me here. I remember when I was in Dallas, Texas, and I just started learning how to drive. I just got my license. And I'm driving my, at that time, old, beat up Mercedes is my first car. And this thing was a tank, but it also was an old car that needed some help maintenance-wise. And I remember driving it one day and it breaking down on the side of the road in way too hot heat of Dallas, Texas in the summer. Oh boy is right. And I remember calling my dad with my little flip phone, because I'm that old, but calling my dad and be like, hey man, this thing is not running. This is what happened. It stopped working, all that sort of stuff. And my dad goes, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to do this, and you'll be able to make it home. We can deal with it whenever there. And I literally said the words, Dad, one, I don't know a single word you just said. Two, if I did know a single word you just said, there is zero chance I'm actually going to be able to do it. And his response to my inability wasn't, I don't have time for you today. No. He said, okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. He knew, I knew, I had nothing to bring. I could not physically fix this car that I needed to get home. I said, okay, I'll be there. I'll do it. Friends, Jesus does for broken and blind people like you and like me what we could never do for ourselves. And we all in this room need to come to the point in our lives where we say, hey, Jesus, not only do I not understand what you were saying, even if I had the ability, which I don't, I could not do this in a million years. Friends, that's where faith begins. Faith begins and lives in our inability to open our own eyes. Faith operates in the space where we say, Jesus, I have nothing to bring here. But here's the reality. We live in Placerville and the surrounding areas, and what are we really good at? Figuring it out, aren't we? Really good at it. We say, all right, I may not be able to do this yet, but you know what? If I work really, really, really hard, if I just tinker with this a little bit more, maybe if I just watch a few more YouTube videos, I will be able to figure it out. But friends, that's not the gospel. Jesus wants our inability. He loves taking our inability and glorifying himself by taking what seems impossible and making it look completely ordinary. Friends, that's faith. And that's the goodness of our God. The gospel isn't God standing at a distance saying, here's what you need to do to fix yourself. The gospel is God coming to us because we can't fix ourselves. We were blind and he gives sight. We were lost and he comes looking for us. We were dead in our sin and he gives us life. We couldn't make our way to him, so he came to us. That's grace. And as Jesus calls people into his reality, he gives them sight to see he himself is enough. Now, I want to close with a few implications this morning. The first question is do we clearly see Jesus? It's the first question all of us have to ask. Because here's the thing. As C.S. Lewis writes in the Screwtape Letters, there are a lot of churchy and Christianese sorts of things we can do that make it seem like we treasure Jesus, but actually are missing the point completely. My question is do you really clearly treasure and see Jesus? That's our invitation for us this morning. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter where you've come from. The invitation is to see Jesus as the treasure. Not just the healer, he is that, but the one who we can say, oh, Son of David, have mercy on me. But how often in our lives do we quickly fall into the trap of saying, okay, Jesus, like, I'll do this for you if fill in the blank. Jesus, I'll start going to church. Look, if my wife and I just don't have a fight today. Jesus, like maybe I'll get there someday. I just need to clean myself up a little bit before I get there, like open my eyes, or at least, but I'm not there yet. Friends, those are not clearly seeing Jesus. When we clearly see Jesus, we understand he welcomes us as we are. He doesn't look at you and I and say, boy, can they just get to their better self yet? No. He looks at us in our brokenness and says, come to me. In our blindness and says, let me heal you. He knows too. When we get to that point, we cry out to Jesus. And it's not just a moment that we cry out to Jesus. We continually cry out to Jesus. We are people who live desperate and dependent. We understand that my spiritual transformation is realizing more and more who I am. I am a sinner in need of God's grace. But I am a saint who is saved. Friends, the goal of the gospel is for us to continually cry out to Jesus. Hey, this is broken in my life. Jesus, help me. Help me see your beauty. Help me be a byproduct of your beauty. Let me not funnel brokenness anymore. And then, friends, we treasure the one who gives sight. We are tired of living in a broken world and tired of producing brokenness, aren't we? How much more beautiful is it when we start to see Jesus restore what is broken in us and restore what is broken in the world? Friends, that's the invitation. Because when we receive Jesus, when we understand who he is and that he is better than anyone and anything else, I start to enjoy his glory. I get to see how he is restoring what is broken in this world, and I get to enjoy